The prairie was quiet that evening, the kind of silence that made every sound echo across the wide open land. A lone cowboy rode slowly beneath the fading sun, his horse tired from a long day's journey. He wasn't looking for adventure, nor was he searching for trouble, just a place to rest. But fate has a way of placing people where they are needed most. As he crossed the ridge, he noticed something unusual near the riverbank. At first, he thought it was only the wind brushing through the tall grass. But then he saw her still and fragile, lying weakly by the water. She was a young woman, dressed in the traditional garments of her people. A native princess who had clearly been struck by illness and exhaustion. The cowboy dismounted at once, unsure of what he was walking into. Out on the frontier, trust between strangers could mean survival or danger. Yet, when he saw her pale face and trembling hands, hesitation faded. He could not ride away, not knowing if she would make it through the night. He offered water from his flask, tore a piece of cloth from his own shirt to cool her forehead, and whispered words of calm, though he didn't know if she understood him. In that moment, it wasn't about tribes, towns, or differences. It was about one human being saving another. Through the long night, he stayed at her side, keeping the fire alive and guarding her against the cold. Each time she stirred, her eyes seemed to search for something. Perhaps hope, perhaps trust. He had seen hardship before, but there was something different about this. It felt as if the land itself had drawn him there for a reason beyond chance. By dawn, her strength was slowly returning. She managed a faint smile, one that carried gratitude deeper than words could express. What the cowboy didn't know was that this rescue not end with a simple thank you. In her culture, acts of bravery and compassion carried meanings that went far beyond what he could imagine. The bond that had formed in those silent hours by the fire was already shaping a future neither of them had expected. And the next day, when the princess made her choice, it would change the course of his life forever. But what could possibly lead a princess to choose a wandering cowboy as her husband? That answer was still to come, as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The cowboy guided his horse slowly, while the princess leaned gently against the saddle. She was still weak, her steps unsteady, so he offered her his strength without asking for anything in return. He didn't know much about her people, only whispers he had heard in frontier town tales of proud warriors, sacred traditions, and a way of life tied closely to the land. To stumble upon a princess of such heritage felt unreal, and yet here she was. Trusting him enough to let him lead her away from danger, he wondered what had brought her to that lonely riverbank. Had she been traveling with others? Was she lost, or had illness separated her from her tribe? Questions turned in his mind. But the princess spoke little, her voice soft and broken by weariness. Still, her eyes told a story, a mix of strength and sorrow, as if she carried the weight of something far greater than her own sickness. When they reached a clearing, he built another fire and shared what little food he had. She accepted with quiet dignity, each movement graceful, even in her weakness. The cowboy noticed the beaded necklace she wore, its colors bright against her faded skin. It was more than an ornament. It was a sign of who she was, a reminder that she belonged to a people who might be searching for her at that very moment. The thought unsettled him. If they found her in his company, would they see him as a savior or as a trespasser? That night, as the flames flickered, he felt the weight of uncertainty pressing harder. He had saved her life, but in doing so, he might have stepped into a story far bigger than himself. What he didn't yet realize was that her decision the next morning would not just be a matter of gratitude, it would be bound to tradition. Loyalty and a destiny he could neither predict nor escape. Morning broke with a pale, golden light, stretching across the open plains. The cowboy stirred from a restless sleep, the crackle of the dying fire still in his ears. He turned his gaze toward the princess, who now sat quietly, her posture straighter than the night before. Though she was still weak, there was a new strength in her eyes, something unspoken yet powerful. She had survived the sickness that nearly claimed her. But it was clear that survival was only the beginning of a deeper story. The cowboy sensed it. This young woman was no ordinary traveler. The way she carried herself, even in silence, spoke of honor and duty. He began to wonder about the world she came from. Somewhere beyond the horizon, her people were waiting, people who looked to her for guidance. But what would they think if she returned with a stranger by her side, a cowboy who knew little of their ways? The thought lingered, heavy as a storm cloud. He offered her more water, and she accepted with a faint nod. For a long time they sat without speaking, listening to the wind sweep through the grass. Then, almost in a whisper, she began to tell him fragments of her story. Her words were broken, yet they carried meaning of illness that struck her suddenly, of a journey interrupted, of being left behind when she could no longer walk. But even then, she never spoke of despair. There was pride in her voice, and something hidden. A secret he couldn't yet understand. The cowboy realized he had been drawn into a mystery much larger than chance. This meeting by the river was no accident. It felt as if the land itself had brought them together. Still, he could not know the decision she was about to make, nor how deeply it would bind their fates. The next day, the cowboy knew their quiet journey could not last. He noticed signs on the trail, hoof prints pressed deep into the dirt, smoke rising faintly in the distance. Someone was near, and he had no doubt it was her people. His heart pounded as he thought about what might happen when they appeared. Would they see him as the man who saved their princess, or as an intruder who dared to touch someone sacred? The princess walked more steadily now, her strength returning with every step, yet her silence weighed heavy. She looked toward the horizon often, as if waiting for something she knew would come. When her eyes met his, there was no fear, only calm determination, as if she had already chosen a path he could not yet see. The cowboy felt both comforted and unsettled by that look. He wanted to ask her what it meant, but words failed him by late afternoon. The sound of drums carried faintly through the wind. The cowboy stopped, his hand resting on the reins, listening. The princess did not flinch. Instead, she lifted her chin with quiet pride. "They are close," she whispered, her voice steady. He realized then that every mile they had traveled together was leading to this moment, a moment where his fate would be decided not by him, but by her. As the shadows lengthened, figures appeared on the ridge. Warriors on horseback, their painted faces stern, their weapons gleaming in the last light of day. They rode down with thunder in their hooves, surrounding the cowboy and the princess in a circle that closed tighter with every second. The air was thick with tension, the fire in their eyes demanding answers. The cowboy's hand hovered near his side, but he knew one wrong move could seal his doom. And then, before anyone could speak, the princess stepped forward, her voice rising above the silence about to declare something that would change everything. The circle of warriors tightened, their eyes sharp as blades, but none spoke. The princess stood tall despite her weakness, her voice steady as she called out words in her native tongue. The cowboy could not understand them, but he felt the shift in the air. The warriors' gazes moved from him to her, their expressions flickering between anger and shock. Whatever she said, it was not what they had expected. For a brief moment, he thought her words had calmed the storm. But then a new figure appeared at the edge of the crowd, riding a dark horse that seemed to command the earth beneath its hooves. He was older, his presence heavy with authority, his face marked by years of battle. From the reaction of the others, the cowboy knew this was no ordinary man. This was a chief, and more than that, someone who held claim over the princess's future. The chief's gaze burned into the cowboy, cold and unyielding. The princess spoke again, louder this time, her hands trembling but her chin lifted high. The cowboy felt his chest tighten as the warrior shifted uneasily, their grip on weapons growing tighter. Then, with a sudden jolt of realization, he understood her words were not just defending him. She was declaring something dangerous, something against the chief's will. A murmur spread through the warriors like wildfire, and the chief's face darkened. The cowboy's instincts screamed at him to reach for his revolver, but he forced his hand to stay still. Violence here would mean the end. The princess had tied his fate to hers with words he could not even comprehend. And now the weight of her choice threatened to ignite the entire circle into chaos. In that charged silence, one truth became clear. Saving her life had only been the beginning. The real test of one that could cost him everything was only just unfolding. The chief's voice cut through the air, deep and commanding. And though the cowboy could not understand the words, he felt their weight. The warriors leaned forward, waiting for the princess's reply. She did not hesitate. With strength that seemed impossible for someone who had been so close to death only days before, she stepped into the circle and declared her choice in a clear, unwavering tone. The cowboy's breath caught when she turned toward him. Her eyes steady. She had chosen him, a stranger, as the man she would stand beside. The reaction was instant. Gasps, shouts, the stamping of hooves. The chief's face turned to stone, fury etched in every line. The cowboy braced himself for the worst, knowing that no weapon at his side could save him now. Yet before a single blade was drawn, the princess lifted the necklace from her own neck, holding it high for all to see. Its colors shimmered in the fading light, a symbol of her lineage and her right to choose. Her people froze, torn between loyalty to their leader and the sacred traditions that bound them. For a long moment, no one moved. The cowboy's heart thundered in his chest, every second stretched thin. Then, slowly, the chief lowered his head. The tension broke like a storm passing over the plains. The warriors stepped back, their anger tempered by respect for the princess's courage. Against all odds, the cowboy's life had been spared not by his strength, but by her choice. But just as relief washed over him, the twist came. The chief raised his hand once more and spoke words heavy with finality. The princess translated softly, her eyes never leaving his. "You are accepted, but only if you prove yourself worthy." The cowboy realized his greatest trial was not behind him, it was yet to come. The cowboy stood in silence, his heart pounding as the chief's words sank in. To be accepted was more than he expected, but to be tested meant his journey with the princess was not yet secure. Yet, when he looked at her, he found no fear in her gaze. She believed in him, and that faith gave him strength. Over the next days, he faced the trial laid before him, not one of guns or blood, but of endurance, honor, and respect. He hunted with the warriors, proved his courage against the wild, and showed his willingness to work for the good of the people rather than only himself. At first, the tribe watched with suspicion, but slowly his quiet determination began to win them over. They saw how he treated the princess not as a prize to be claimed, but as a partner whose wisdom and strength guided him. They saw that he carried no pride in saving her life, only gratitude for the bond that had formed between them. Even the chief, stern and unyielding, began to acknowledge the truth. This cowboy was no ordinary wanderer. When the trial was complete, the princess once again stood before her people. With steady words, she declared him not just her rescuer, but the man she had chosen as her husband. This time, there were no shouts, no fury, only silence, followed by nods of respect. The cowboy realized he had not only earned her trust, but a place among her people. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, he understood the journey had changed him forever. What began as an act of compassion by a lonely river had grown into something greater, a story of love, courage, and destiny written across the wide frontier. And though the land was vast and uncertain, He knew wherever they traveled, they would walk it together. If you enjoyed this story and want more intense thrillers and suspenseful adventures, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with friends who love a good mystery. Your support helps me bring you more stories just like this one.